They told me night terrors couldn't kill you. That your heart might race, your muscles might freeze, your brain might scream, but you'd always wake up safe. That's what I used to believe, until I moved into my aunt's old house and heard the whisper. It started 3 nights after I arrived. But let me take you back a bit. My name is George Halwell. I'm 32, a sleep researcher by profession, and for the past year, I've been dealing with night terrors so vivid, I wake up gasping like I've drowned. I don't remember most of them, just flashes, dark corridors, distant screams, something standing over me. After 2 panic attacks and nearly crashing my car from exhaustion, I took a sabbatical. A break, that's what the department called it. Time to reset. And the perfect place to do that, as it turned out, was the house I inherited from my Aunt Meredith. It's in rural Vermont, about 2 hours from the nearest hospital, at the end of a dirt road that eats tires for breakfast. It's a tall Victorian with peeling paint, arched windows, and a chimney that leans like it's listening. It creaks when it shouldn't. It sighs when there's no wind. She died in her sleep, alone. Peaceful, the coroner said. I never really knew her well. She was always the odd one in the family. Talked about the veil between worlds like it was a curtain she could pull back whenever she wanted. My parents stopped visiting when I was a teenager. Said she gave them the creeps. But she left me the house. Just me. The first day, I set up my equipment. Audio recorder, infrared camera, sleep monitor, standard gear. It wasn't meant for anything paranormal. Just science. I wanted to analyze my REM patterns, track movement, maybe pinpoint what was triggering the terrors. The first 2 nights were uneventful. My sleep was shallow, restless, but nothing unusual. Then came night 3. I remember it because I had a dream, not a terror, just strange. I was standing in a room I didn't recognize, dimly lit, walls covered in wallpaper that writhed like it was alive. There was a door at the far end. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but I heard something. A voice. Low, distant, like someone mumbling from inside a tunnel. I couldn't make out the words, only that they were ancient, coiled like smoke, and the tone wasn't human. I woke up with a jolt, sweat dripping down my neck. Later that morning, I played back the audio. At first, it was static. Nothing unusual. Just the faint rustle of sheets and the occasional creak of the house settling. But at 3:13 a.m., something changed. The static dipped. Then layered beneath it, barely audible, a voice began to speak. Not mine. Not any voice I recognized. And it was in Latin. I didn't speak Latin. Not even close. But I recognized the rhythm of the language, the way it curled and rolled like scripture being recited backwards. The voice was calm. Male. Cold. I froze. My first instinct was to rationalize. Maybe it was an old recording. A broadcast? But I had no radio, no TV, and the house didn't even have reliable internet. I rewound the tape. Played it again. There it was, Revertetter. In Nacht. Sanguis. Revertetter. My fingers trembled as I paused the recording. I didn't need a translation to understand the feeling crawling up my spine. That voice wasn't trying to scare me. It was announcing something, and I had no idea what I had just invited into my sleep. I didn't expect anything at first. The first few nights in the farmhouse had been quiet, too quiet, actually. No dreams, no nightmares, just an odd feeling in my chest, like I was being watched while I slept. I kept brushing it off as the stress of moving, or maybe the way the cold wind crept through the old wooden walls. I had my recorder set up on the nightstand next to me. It was a small digital device, reliable, clear audio, the same kind I used at the lab. I would hit record before I fell asleep, then check the files in the morning. The first 3 recordings were uneventful. Just the hum of the space heater, the occasional creak of the house settling, and my own light snoring. I almost felt embarrassed listening to them, like I was hoping something weird would happen. But on the 4th night, the static began. It was faint, a low buzz buried beneath the silence. At first I thought it was interference, maybe the mic picking up on a faulty outlet or something. But when I zoomed in and boosted the audio, I noticed the pattern. The sound was pulsing, like a slow heartbeat. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the static clicked into a short burst of noise, then silence. Then something I couldn't explain. A voice. Very soft. Very slow. Whispering. I froze, headphones still in my ears, hands suddenly cold. I replayed it 3 times to be sure I wasn't imagining it. The voice didn't sound human. It was dry, papery, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. And it was saying something that didn't make sense. I grabbed a notepad and jotted down what I thought I heard. Reaverti ter. Latin. It sounded like Latin. The whisper lasted all of 5 seconds before the recording cut back to silence. I scanned through the rest of the file, heart pounding, but nothing else stood out. I stared at the wall for a while after that. Could it be sleep talking? A buried memory from college Latin class, maybe? Or maybe a weird auditory hallucination brought on by stress. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I was a scientist, not a ghost hunter. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, had spoken directly into my ear that night. I tried to sleep again the next night. Same setup. Recorder on. Lights off. A glass of water on the nightstand, untouched. I woke up groggy but mostly normal. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and opened the new audio file. Nothing for the first few hours. Then, right at 3:07 a.m. again, static. Louder this time. Harsher. And the voice returned. This time, it was closer to the mic. Like it was right beside my face. Not just one word, either. A full sentence. My blood ran cold when I played it back. The voice whispered. Reverteter. Insomnies. Apparator iannua. I stared at the waveform, hand trembling on the mouse. I didn't know what it meant, not exactly. But I understood one part. Iannua, the Latin word for door. Something was whispering about a door. I checked every room in the house that morning. Nothing was open. No windows. No closets. Nothing out of place. But the air felt different. Heavier. Like something had walked through, and I just missed it. That night, I locked every door and window in the house. I even dragged an old dresser in front of the basement door. And still, I hit record. Because I needed to know. Because something was trying to tell me it wasn't finished. I stared at the waveform on my laptop screen, fingers frozen above the keyboard. The hiss was there again. Low, steady, like someone breathing just outside the mix range. I moved the playback cursor slowly forward, eyes fixed on the timeline. Then it happened again. The whisper. Not like before. This time it was clearer. Sharper. I could make out actual syllables, even though I didn't understand a word. Reverteter. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding in my chest. I hadn't said that. I know my voice, even when I'm groggy or sleep-talking. This voice was different. Too smooth. Too deliberate. It rolled over the consonants like it had practiced for years. I played the clip again. Then again. Slower. Slower. Until the whisper no longer sounded human at all. Just a shadow crawling across the floor of my brain. I couldn't let it go. The next morning, I drove to Burlington, to the university where I used to work. I didn't know who else to turn to. I told myself I was just being thorough, that I wasn't losing it. I had a contact there, Professor Anna Clark, a linguist with a background in classical languages. We'd worked together once on a paper about dream language in trauma patients. When I showed up at her office unannounced, she looked surprised, then concerned. I hadn't seen her in over a year. "George? You look thin," she said. Her eyes scanned my face. I hadn't realized how bad I must have looked. Sleep deprivation will do that. "I need your help," I said, pulling out my flash drive. "Just listen to this." I plugged it into her computer, loaded the clip, and hit play. She listened, arms crossed. The audio hissed, then came the whisper. She didn't move. When it ended, she reached for the mouse, slid the volume down, and turned to me slowly. "Where did you record this?" "In my bedroom. I've been monitoring my sleep. I've been having episodes." She looked at the screen again. Then back at me. "That's Latin," she said quietly. "I thought so. What does it mean?" Her brow furrowed. "Reverteter. It means, he shall return." The words settled between us like fog. I tried to laugh, but my throat was dry. Maybe I read it somewhere and said it in my sleep. Maybe I heard it in a movie. "No," she interrupted. "That's not how you said it. The pronunciation is precise. Too precise. The inflection is old. Ecclesiastical. Like it came from someone trained to recite prayers or rituals." I felt a cold line trace down my spine. "George, this isn't something you'd casually repeat unless you studied it or heard it from someone who did." She burned the audio onto a CD and asked if she could show it to a colleague. I agreed but left shortly after. I didn't want to stay in that building any longer. The drive home was silent, but my thoughts weren't. The phrase echoed over and over in my head, bouncing off the inside of my skull. "He shall return." Return from where? And who? I got home just before sunset. The sky was a dull gray, clouds thick like wet cotton. I stood at the edge of the driveway for a moment, staring at the second-floor window, my bedroom. The house looked darker than usual. Still. Watching me. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat on the edge of my bed with the recorder beside me and a Latin dictionary open on the floor. At 3:14 a.m., the air turned cold. And then, without touching the recorder, I heard it start to play. My voice. But it wasn't my voice. It was deeper, slower, and it said things I couldn't understand, long, slithering phrases that turned my stomach. I tried to shut it off. The button didn't respond. The power cord slipped from the socket on its own. The whisper kept playing, and as I stared at the flickering red light, I realized something that made my skin go numb. It wasn't a recording anymore. It was speaking live, right now, in my room, behind me, and I was too scared to turn around. I woke up shivering. The first thing I noticed was the cold. Not the kind of chill you feel from a cracked window or an overactive air conditioner. This was bone-deep biting. My hands were numb, my feet wet with something thick and sticky. Mud. I wasn't in bed. I was standing outside, in the woods, barefoot. The sky above was a dull gray, the moon half hidden behind low clouds. Everything around me was still, as if the forest had paused to watch. I turned slowly, trying to understand what was happening. My breath came out in short clouds, and my chest ached like I'd been running. There were scratches on my arms, thin and red. My pajamas were damp, clinging to my skin. My recording device was still strapped to my wrist, like I'd left it the night before. I stumbled back toward the house, feeling the sting of pebbles and broken twigs digging into my soles. The porch light flickered when I got near, something it hadn't done before, and I paused at the door, half expecting someone to be standing behind it. No one was. Inside, everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The air was heavier, still cold. I went straight to the laptop and uploaded the audio from last night. I sat in front of the screen, heart racing, as I pressed play. It started normally, me getting into bed, mumbling something about the recorder, the sound of the blankets shifting. Then silence. An hour passed in static and soft breathing. Then came the sound of movement. Slow at first, almost like sheets rustling. Then a creak. My bed frame. Then footsteps. I heard myself sit up. Then a voice. It wasn't quite mine, but it came from my mouth. Excita me porta e parator. I froze. The words were in Latin again. Same whispery tone as before, only now they were coming through me. There was no static this time, no background interference. Just my voice calm, clear, and wrong. The footsteps continued. I listened to myself walk across the room. The door creaked open. Then the recording picked up the sound of the front door unlocking. I knew then that I had sleepwalked right out into the woods. But it wasn't over. At the 3:21 mark, I began singing. Not a song I recognized. A low, chanting rhythm, like something ancient and broken. The voice didn't rise or fall. It just kept going, steady and hollow. Then something answered. Not in Latin. Not in any language I understood. But there was something else on the tape, something deeper. A second voice, growling low, joining the chant from a distance. I slammed the laptop shut. I stared at my own reflection in the black screen, unsure of what scared me more, that I was doing this in my sleep, or that I wasn't alone when I did it. I showered, scrubbed the mud off my feet and arms, but I couldn't scrub away the fear. It clung to me like a film I couldn't wash off. Later that afternoon, I found a notebook on the floor near my bed. I didn't remember putting it there. The pages were covered in writing. Lines and lines of it, not in English, not in anything I knew. But the handwriting was mine. Sloppy and jagged, but definitely mine. I flipped to the last page. One phrase had been repeated over and over. Tu es Ianua. You are the door. I couldn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. The attic had always made me uncomfortable. I avoided it for days, brushing off the occasional sounds I thought I heard from above. Soft dragging, like something being pulled across the wooden floor, or faint thumps that didn't match the rhythm of the wind. But that night, something changed. It was around 2:14 a.m. when I jolted awake, sweating, heart pounding. The recording from the night before had picked up a new word I hadn't heard before. Susum. I looked it up. It meant rise. That single word echoed in my mind like a command. I grabbed my flashlight, climbed out of bed, and made my way to the attic. The stairs creaked louder than I remembered. Each step felt like it was warning me, trying to talk me out of going up. The attic door groaned when I opened it. Dust swirled in the air, catching the beam of my flashlight like ash falling in slow motion. The space was bigger than I thought. Old furniture covered in yellowing sheets, broken trunks, boxes filled with rotting books and cracked picture frames. The air was heavier up there, thick and sour like something had been decaying behind the walls for years. I was about to turn back when I noticed something strange. On the far side of the attic, behind a dusty bookshelf, was a small wooden panel, slightly cracked. It didn't match the other boards. I pushed the shelf aside, it screeched horribly, and crouched in front of the panel. My fingers trembled as I pulled it open. Behind it was a narrow passageway, barely wide enough for my shoulders. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. I hesitated, then crawled in. The passage ended in a hidden room. It was square, maybe 8 by 8 feet, with no windows. The floorboards were warped and dark. The walls were covered with symbols, etched, burned, and painted in what looked like dried blood. Strange spirals. Crosses turned upside down. Circles filled with Latin phrases. And in the center, a wooden crate. I slowly pried it open. Inside were books. Old, leather-bound, their pages yellow and curling at the edges. One had a name carved on the inside cover, Liam Corvin. My stomach twisted when I saw the date, 1651. I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor and opened the book. The handwriting was sharp and aggressive, like the pen had been forced to obey. Each page was a journal entry, filled with twisted theology and ritual descriptions. He spoke of sleep not as rest, but as a threshold. In slumber the veil thins. The flesh softens. The soul floats untethered. There I wait. There I feed. I turned another page. My name was written there. George Halwell. Not just once. Several times. In different sections, as if I'd been part of this story before I ever arrived. I felt sick. The air in the room dropped several degrees. My breath came out in puffs. My flashlight began to flicker again. I heard a whisper, not from the hallway, not from my mind. From inside the room. Sussum. The same word from the audio. Rise. I spun around. No one was there. But I swear, I could feel someone just behind me. Breathing. Watching. I shoved the books back into the crate, grabbed one at random, and crawled back out as fast as I could. I didn't stop moving until I was back in my room, door locked, every light on. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The room in the attic was real. Liam Corvin was real. And somehow he knew who I was before I ever stepped foot in this house. And now, he was whispering my name in the dark. I didn't want to call her. For days, I kept telling myself this was just stress, just bad sleep, maybe even a bit of paranoia. But when I listened to that last recording, I knew I needed help. Not a priest. Not a ghost hunter. I needed someone who knew my mind better than I did. Dr. Ellis was my old therapist from Boston. Calm voice, glasses always slightly crooked, and a way of making silence feel safe. She had seen me through panic attacks in college, and helped me manage my first round of sleepwalking years ago. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but I still had her number saved. I didn't tell her everything at first. Just the basics. I moved to a house my aunt left me. I've been having night terrors again. I'm recording myself sleeping. There was a pause on the line. And what are you finding on these recordings? She asked gently. I hesitated. Voices. Sometimes mine. Sometimes not. Another pause. Longer this time. George, are you saying you're hearing another person in the room with you? No, I said quickly, rubbing my forehead. Not like that. I mean, it's me. But the voice isn't right. It's deeper. Like hollow. It doesn't sound like something a human throat can make. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Send me a clip, she finally said. So I did. Just 30 seconds from the night before. The part where I spoke Latin, or whatever it was. I emailed it to her, then waited in the dark living room with my phone in my hand, bouncing my leg up and down like a jackhammer. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. When she called back, her voice had changed. No longer calm. She was whispering. George, where did you get that? I told you, it's me during sleep. She didn't respond at first. Then she said, that voice. I ran it through a spectrogram filter. It's layered. One voice under another. Yours and something else. Something older. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean older? It's like a second frequency, lower, almost subsonic. It doesn't behave naturally. The tone bends, like it's trying to match your voice. My mouth went dry. I glanced around the room. Every shadow suddenly felt alive. I hadn't turned on a single light. I couldn't remember why. I think I'm losing time, I whispered. I keep waking up in places I didn't fall asleep. I found mud in my bed. My fingernails are cracked and bloody. I think I'm doing things in my sleep. You need to leave that house, she said quickly, her tone sharp now. Don't stay there another night. Whatever's happening, your body's being used for something. This is beyond sleepwalking. I can't leave, I said without thinking. I don't think it'll let me. Even I didn't understand what I meant by that. It just came out. There was silence on the line. Then Dr. Ellis said, "George, I want you to listen to me. Do not go to sleep tonight. Stay awake. Do whatever it takes." I hung up without replying. Not out of rudeness, out of fear. Because even as she spoke, I could hear something faint just beneath her voice. A breath, a whisper, and it was coming from my end of the line. I slowly looked at the recorder on the table. It was on, recording. I hadn't touched it. My hands had been holding the phone the whole time. I walked over, heart pounding. The little red light blinked softly. I pressed stop, then hit play. At first, I heard my voice, saying hello, fumbling with the phone. Then something else. Right before I answered her call, I heard myself speak. In that other voice. "Tonight, the veil thins." I dropped the recorder, and from the hallway behind me, I heard the slow creak of the attic door opening. On its own. I hadn't been in the attic since I moved in. The ceiling groaned every time the wind picked up, but I always told myself it was just the house settling. Still, something about the creaking above my bedroom made it hard to sleep. Last night, the sound was different, sharper, more deliberate, like footsteps. Like someone was walking back and forth. This morning, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and pulled down the old wooden ladder to the attic. Dust exploded into the air as I climbed up. The hatch groaned open like it hadn't moved in years. The moment I stepped into the attic, the air changed. Heavy, cold, like something didn't want me there. The space was long and narrow, with wooden beams crossing overhead. Old furniture covered in yellowed sheets stood in crooked rows like forgotten graves. I swept the flashlight around slowly. Everything was still. Until I saw it. One of the sheets was moving. Just barely. Fluttering. I walked toward it, my feet crunching on debris. I pulled the sheet away. Behind it was a door. I swear it hadn't been there before. It was narrow, wooden, with rusted hinges and no handle. Just a keyhole shaped like a downward-pointing triangle. I hesitated. Something inside me said, "Don't open it." But I was past the point of ignoring strange things. I pushed. The door creaked open with a groan that sounded like something waking up. The room was tiny. Walls of rough stone. No windows. A single chair sat in the center, with a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. The mirror looked ancient, its surface dark, warped like a pool of oil. Carved along the edges were symbols I couldn't read. They twisted in strange shapes that made my stomach turn just looking at them. On the ground beside the chair was a book. I picked it up. The leather was soft, too soft, and warm like skin. No title. Inside were pages filled with neat, looping handwriting. The name Liam Corvin was written on the first page. My heart dropped. I had read that name before. In one of the journals I found in the study downstairs. The entries were disturbing. He spoke of dreams that bled into waking life, of hearing voices through mirrors, of using sleep as a doorway. I sat on the floor and kept reading. He wrote about something called the vessel, that it must be kept weak, tired, vulnerable. He said the body was a door if you left it open long enough. He spoke of the whispering room, a place that didn't exist on blueprints or maps, but found its way into the attics of those it chose. He said if you heard your name spoken while asleep, it wasn't a dream. It was a summoning. I stopped. The hairs on my neck were standing straight. I remembered last night, how I woke up gasping because I heard someone whisper, "George, come back." And I did come back. But now I wasn't sure if I had brought something else with me. I stood up, but the mirror caught my eye again. My reflection didn't move. It just stood there. Still. Expressionless. Watching me. I stepped closer. The me in the mirror smiled. I didn't. I dropped the journal and stumbled out of the room, slamming the hidden door shut behind me. Back in my bedroom, I checked the audio recorder from the night before. I had left it running like always. At 3:09 a.m., my voice spoke clearly. "Open the door, George," followed by another voice, one I had never heard before. Low, cold, ancient. "He's almost ready." The file ended with the sound of slow, deliberate breathing. Not mine. I don't know what's happening anymore. I don't know if I'm being haunted, possessed, or losing my mind. But I do know one thing. That room was waiting for me. And something inside it knows my name. I didn't sleep the night before. Not really. I just drifted in and out of a fog. Every time my eyes shut, I'd hear it, that whisper again. Louder now. Steady. Not like the broken fragments from before. I stayed up most of the night listening to the new recording I'd made. At exactly 3:12 a.m., my voice changed. It dropped a pitch. Became slower, colder. It wasn't me. I pressed play again. Corpus somniae parator, voca me per sanguinum. It didn't mean anything to me. But I knew it wasn't just gibberish. The rhythm, the way the words curled through the silence, it felt like a ritual. A sermon. That morning, I drove into town. I hadn't shaved, hadn't even changed clothes. I just needed answers. I found an old Latin professor's contact from my university days. Dr. Marla Winters. Retired, but still sharp. She owed me a favor. She met me at a small diner. I didn't even sit down before I played the audio on my phone. Her face changed. That's ecclesiastical Latin, she said. Old. Like pre-Reformation era. This sounds like a sermon. A very dark one. I asked her what it meant. She scribbled it down as best she could, then read the translation aloud, almost whispering. The body of sleep is opened. Call me through blood. Through dream I cross. My skin turned cold. Do you know where this comes from? She asked. I didn't answer. I just got up and left. Back at the house, the sun was already setting. The trees outside looked like they were leaning closer to the windows. The wind whispered through the cracks in the walls. I felt watched. I set up the camera again. Not just the voice recorder this time. I needed to see. To witness what was happening while I slept. I left the bedroom light on. I sat on the bed, holding the journal I found in the attic. Liam Corvin's name was scrawled across the first page, like it had been carved with a blade. The pages had grown brittle, but the ink looked almost fresh. I read one sentence again and again. Dreams are the doors. Pain is the key. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up to the sound of chanting. It was my own voice. I wasn't in bed anymore. I was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, eyes open wide. The candles I didn't light were burning. A ring of salt I didn't pour circled me, and I was speaking, no preaching. The video file was 6 minutes long. I watched it right after sunrise. I sat in that ring and spoke in Latin without blinking, without pausing. The tone was wrong, smooth, commanding, like a priest reciting something sacred, but twisted. I translated the words later with Marla's notes. Open the gate, let the flesh break. I am ready. He is near. My hands were bleeding. Both palms. I must have clenched them so tightly during the trance that my nails dug through skin. There were symbols drawn in the blood on the floor. One of them matched a carving in the back of Liam's journal. A circle with 3 interlocked eyes. I scrubbed them away. I tried anyway, but the blood had already soaked into the wood. I didn't sleep the next night. I couldn't. The sermon was over. But I knew something had heard it. Something was listening. And worse, something was answering. I drove out early, though I'd barely slept the night before. My dreams had become more vivid, too vivid. In them, I stood beneath a red sky, inside a rotting church with broken pews and candles that flickered without flames. A voice would call my name, but it wasn't really mine anymore. That morning, I followed the map I'd sketched from Liam's journal. His notes spoke of a chapel in the woods, one that had been sealed off after the townsfolk accused him of heresy. They said he performed rituals there, offerings in the dark. Most locals pretend it doesn't exist anymore. But I had to see it. I needed to know what Liam was doing, what I was being pulled into. The road turned to dirt. Then the dirt turned to gravel. Finally, I reached a rusted gate hidden behind trees that leaned unnaturally inward, like they were whispering secrets to each other. A faded wooden sign hung on the fence, barely legible under the moss. Sanctus Deus. Mortis silentium. Holy God. Dead silence. I climbed over and walked the path, dry leaves crunching under my boots. After 10 minutes, the trees broke, and there it was. The church stood crooked and forgotten. Its stone walls were cracked, windows shattered. Ivy strangled the structure like it wanted to pull it into the earth. A broken cross hung sideways over the entrance, swaying slightly in the windless air. I hesitated at the door. My heart thumped like it knew something I didn't. Inside, the scent hit me first, dust, old wood, and something else. Iron. Like blood, faint but sharp. The pews were splintered, knocked over as if something had stormed through in a rage. The altar remained intact, though barely. Candles still sat in rusted holders, melted to stubs. I stared at them, uneased by how untouched they looked. Like someone had been here. Recently. The journal said, below the altar, where the sun does not touch, lies the path to resurrection. I stepped up, heart pounding, and examined the altar more closely. Beneath the decaying wood was a trapdoor, hidden under a warped rug. I hesitated only for a second before pulling it open. Hinges screeched like something crying out. A black hole stared back at me. I turned on my flashlight. Stone steps led downward, swallowed by darkness. The air that rose up from below was cold and damp, laced with the smell of old soil and rot. I descended slowly, each footstep echoing louder than the last. At the bottom was a crypt. The walls were stone, lined with shelves stacked with books, jars, and bones. Candles had melted into pools on the floor. My breath came in sharp bursts as I scanned the space. There was something wrong about the air. It pressed in like a thick fog, humming slightly, almost like breathing. In the center of the room was a small table, and on it, a scroll bound in red string. Beneath the scroll, etched into the wood, was a symbol I'd seen in my sleep, an eye with roots surrounded by teeth. I reached out, hand trembling. The moment I touched the scroll, something shifted. The candles flared to life. No spark, no flame, just suddenly burning, like they had been waiting for this moment. I opened the scroll. It wasn't in Latin. Or maybe it was, but something in my mind understood it instantly. The symbols crawled under my skin, whispering their meaning. It was a summoning, a guide to return, the one who sleeps beneath the veil. Instructions. Steps. The final line struck me cold. Once read, the offering has begun. My vision blurred. I dropped the scroll, backing away, heart slamming against my ribs. I heard footsteps above. Slow. Measured. Someone else was here. I turned off the flashlight and held my breath. Then I heard it. My voice. Calling my name. George? But I was the only one down there. I fled. I didn't look back. I ran through the church, through the trees, and didn't stop until I reached the car. Even as I sped down the road, I could still hear it echoing behind me, too close to be real, too clear to be imagined. Whatever I'd opened, it wasn't just in the church anymore. It was in me. I don't remember recording last night. I woke up in the hallway, curled up against the wall like a wounded animal. My throat was raw like I had been screaming. But when I checked the cameras and audio, there was no screaming. No, it was worse than that. I watched myself, if you can call that thing me, rise from bed at exactly 2:13 a.m. I moved slow, like every joint in my body resisted the motion. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply, shoulders trembling. Then, I started to speak. But it wasn't my voice. It was lower, richer, like someone twice my size was speaking through my lungs. Every word came out in Latin. I didn't know what it meant, but I recognized one word, vessel. It echoed over and over. Vessel, vessel, vessel. My voice sounded calm, almost soothing. But something in the tone made my skin crawl. It was the kind of voice that could talk you into drinking poison. I leaned forward in the video, staring into the camera. My eyes were completely black. No whites. Just pits of shadow that swallowed the light. And then the most disturbing part, behind me in the frame, something moved. At first, it was just a flicker. A ripple in the air near the closet. Then it stepped out. It wasn't a person exactly. More like a shape, a tall, lean silhouette of a man, wrapped in something like old robes. No face. Just smooth skin stretched where features should be. It stood there at the foot of my bed, hands clasped like in prayer, watching me speak. I paused the video. My hands were shaking. My fingernails had dug tiny moons into my palms. This thing, whatever it was, had been in the room with me. Inches away. And I never knew. I turned to look at the bed behind me. It looked exactly the same as the video. Neatly made, sheets still creased, camera still mounted. Nothing had changed. Except me. I looked in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes like bruises. My lips were pale. But worst of all, I saw something strange on my chest, just below my collarbone, a faint red symbol. A shape I recognized from Liam's journal. It hadn't been there yesterday. I scrubbed at it, panicked. But it wouldn't fade. It wasn't drawn. It was burned into my skin. That night, I didn't sleep. I tried, but every time I shut my eyes, I saw him. Liam. Not as a priest. Not even as a man. But as something else now. Something that didn't belong in this world. I kept hearing his voice, whispering behind my ear. You open the door, George. You are the door. It echoed in my head until sunrise. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was still in control. Or if I ever had been. Something is inside me. And I think it likes it here. I couldn't stop shaking. For hours, I sat in the living room, wrapped in a heavy blanket, staring at the grandfather clock across from me. The only light in the house came from a flickering candle on the table, casting tall shadows that moved like they were breathing. The power had gone out again. Not that it mattered. I didn't want to see clearly anymore. Outside, the blood moon was rising. I had read about this night in Liam's scroll. Under the red eye of the sky, the veil thins, it said. The vessel must surrender. I had laughed when I first read that line. But now I wasn't laughing. My chest felt like something was inside it, pushing, stretching. My thoughts weren't mine anymore. I'd catch myself whispering things under my breath. Words I didn't understand. Names I didn't know. And when I blinked, sometimes I wasn't alone. There were moments, seconds maybe, where I saw someone standing in the mirror. Someone that wasn't me. Same clothes. Same eyes. But not the same expression. His face was calm, too calm. Cold. Like he knew something I didn't. The moonlight bled in through the broken curtains. Red and thick like spilled wine. I picked up the recorder, hands trembling. "It's happening," I whispered. "I think he's already halfway in. I don't know how much longer I can keep him out." I didn't sleep, but I drifted. That's the only way I can describe it. My body stayed on the couch, but my mind, it slipped. Suddenly, I was somewhere else. It was pitch black. No sound, no light, just black. I couldn't see my own hands. I tried to move, but couldn't feel my legs. Panic rose fast. Then I heard it. Chains. Clinking, pulling tight. And breathing. Deep, low breathing. I wasn't alone. Then came the voice. Not outside of me. Inside. Echoing in my skull like it lived in my bones. "You kept the gate open, George. You studied. You searched. You obeyed." I tried to speak, but my tongue was heavy. My lips wouldn't move. "You are the door," the voice said. Then I saw him. Liam. He stepped out of the darkness like he'd been there the whole time. Pale, wet skin like wax, black eyes with no whites, and a mouth that never quite closed. He was wearing my face. My clothes. But I knew it wasn't me. He walked up to me and crouched down. He smiled. "I wore many before you," he said, "but none so eager." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I felt cold metal on my wrists. Chains. Real ones. They were holding me in place. He leaned in. His breath was hot and smelled like rot. "You dream of escape," he whispered. "But you gave me the key." Then he began peeling. His hands reached for his own face. No, my face, and he pulled it down like a mask. Skin slid off like wet paper. Underneath was nothing. Just a swirling black hole. A mouth without a throat. A voice without a body. He stepped forward and pressed the hollow against my chest. I felt it enter. Pain unlike anything I've ever felt ripped through me. Like fire mixed with ice, crawling under my skin, chewing its way into every nerve. I could feel him uncoiling inside me, like smoke filling an empty room. And then, I woke up, on the floor, back in the living room. My candle had burned out. My arms were covered in bruises, deep purple ones shaped like fingers. My nose was bleeding. So were my eyes. I crawled to the recorder. My voice was still playing. Except, it wasn't my voice anymore. It was him. Calm. Cold. Triumphant. "The gate is open," Liam said through my mouth. "I have returned." I dropped the recorder and backed away. The mirror on the wall caught my movement and froze. My reflection didn't move. It just stared back at me and smiled. That wasn't me anymore. That was Liam. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember lighting the match. I remember the attic trembling beneath my feet as I tossed the flame onto Liam's journal, then onto the mirror. The fire caught too quickly, like it had been waiting. The smoke curled in shapes, faces, open mouths, eyes that blinked at me. I remember screaming, not from fear, but from something deeper, like a part of me knew it was too late. And then nothing. Now I'm awake. I think. The floor beneath me is cold stone. Not the wooden planks of the attic. It smells like wet dirt, iron, and something sweet and rotting. My hands are tied behind my back. Rope? No, too soft. Hair? I try to move, but my limbs are heavy, like someone poured lead into my bones. It's dark, but I can feel the space around me. Not empty. Something breathes with me. Not near me. Inside me. I close my eyes, but the darkness doesn't change. And then I hear it, my voice. "Don't be afraid, George. It's me, but not me." The tone is flatter, more controlled. Like a version of me that no longer feels pain or confusion. Like the voice has peeled away everything soft and human. "You open the gate," it says. "You were always meant to." I shake my head. My lips are dry and cracked, but I manage a whisper. "This isn't real." But the voice laughs, low and cold, echoing in my head like it's bouncing through empty chambers. It is more real than anything you've ever touched. This house was never yours. You were mine before you were born. I try to scream, but all that comes out is a cough. My chest aches like something is pressing down on it. I feel a presence behind me. Close. Breathing against my neck. And then something begins to hum. A low chant in Latin, the same I'd heard in the recordings. In carne mea requiescat. In somnis resurgam. In my flesh he shall rest. In dreams I shall rise. I begin to drift. Not asleep. Not awake. That place in between. The veil. I see flickers of light, memories. A boy running in a field. A woman smiling at the dinner table. A hospital room. A rusted church bell. Then they shatter. The images burst like bubbles, replaced with visions of red skies and cracked stone altars. I open my mouth and he speaks through it. My name is Liam Corvin. No. My name is Liam Corvin, the voice says again, firmer this time. And then, softer, as if comforting a child, it adds, and you are gone. I scream inside. I scream louder than I ever have. But my mouth only smiles. The next morning, the fire department finds the house burned out at the top. A freak attic fire, they say. Smoke damage, but the structure still stands. I'm seen 2 days later in town. I wave to the postman. Smile at the grocer. People say I look healthier. More confident. My voice is deeper. My eyes a little darker. But no one notices how I no longer blink as often. How I stop in front of mirrors, not to look, but to listen. In my bedroom, the recorder still runs every night. And every morning, the same phrase is whispered back. The gate is open. I have returned.